Here we are. We need a mic over here.
It's a wonderful
chaos, and we like it that way.
It's a wonderful chaos.
And we like it that way. I don't think anyone has heard it yet on our video, so that's a treat that people have to look forward to. In fact, after this video, we're going to publish the big news, and the big news we can announce right now is that we are now live on every podcast channel you can imagine. If you go to any podcast channel and say, play a Wonderful Chaos podcast, then we appear.
Yeah.
Alexa, play a Wonderful Chaos podcast.
Alexa, play a Wonderful Chaos podcast where Andy's laughing and Bambos is crying. You get the whole shebang.
And then we also have on Siri. If you say, hey, Siri, play a Wonderful Chaos podcast, it comes up as well. So it is available. We've got 10 shows that Cass Midgley, who is a producer, who's done the show Everyone's Agnostic, got 500,000 downloads, really big in the genre of spirituality. He took it on and said he'd edit it. So he edited it for us. That's now available.
Nice.
Go to any of the podcasting platforms. It's really fantastic.
Congratulations.
And we'll have 100 of those.
200.
So today's topic, Bambos, today we are discussing management versus leadership, and we're doing that on?
I have no idea.
Good idea. Wonderful Chaos. See you soon. Hey, Bambos, like a boss. Like a boss. Today is, for me, one of these shows that it was kind of a follow-up from last week's show when it was avoidance versus seeking. And I kind of felt like these two dovetailed really nicely into one another, because what I see is that there's a state of mind that one has in either role of management and leadership, and that's something that I'd like to take on from last week's thing. There's one thing I need to say before we begin. I'm a little bit distracted.
Why is that?
Well, because Ronnie asked me to shave my eyebrows yesterday, and apparently I took a big chunk out of one of them. So
you shaved your eyebrows?
Well, I do, because they're sort of these really big raunchy things. So basically, Ronnie said, please, whatever you do, make sure to put your glasses down when you're on today's show, so no one can see how horrible you cut your eyebrows last night.
I didn't notice.
Yeah, I've been using different techniques, and some aren't.
You guys are
easy.
hilarious, I swear to God.
And what?
Well, just on the journey of doing these podcasts, we always get to share our intimate bits.
Yeah. Figuratively speaking, of course.
Yes, of course, Andy.
Yeah, and just before we jump in, how have you been? People don't realize a lot of times we see each other 2 minutes before we go live, so we don't get to check in all that much. So how are things?
I sent you a message, I think, a couple of days ago, right? Just saying thank you for the show that we did with Chris Gorell. Just hammering into me. Actually, he hammered into me that I could fully own emotional intelligence in my life, instead of trying to change that and shift it and think there's something wrong. So there's been a really deep drop in. Like, I arrive here and I don't feel any anxiety that I need to perform or I need to prepare or say or do the right thing or not.
Yeah. For those that didn't see the show, what was beautiful, and that something that we did off air after that talk with Bambos, was there was a discussion as to you not necessarily feeling that from childhood, you never being told that you were smart. If anything, being told you were dumb.
Yeah.
And that
it's funny when you say that, I get the voices in my head immediately.
Yeah. What are they?
I'm not gonna call out my parents.
Oh, is that right? Okay. Yeah. Well, interesting. So you say you're not going to call out your parents.
Oh, but then to be specific,
Meaning that they would have said something like that to you that would have given you that feeling.
Yeah.
Okay, so my dad, I always talk about my dad and how he trashed me.
Well, your dad's dead.
That's true, isn't it? It's so much easier to talk when someone's not around, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's also acknowledge that, whatever your parents were doing at that time were the best they could do, and not to
Yeah.
justify anything, but like even to say you can't say it almost makes it as if it was true to begin with. In some ways, whatever you took away from how they treated you was more the experience than maybe what they said even. So you're trying to protect them a lot,
That is very true. I'm
Yeah.
trying to protect them.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
talked about it. It's kind of interesting because you're.
Well, it would be a bit more like you're never going to amount to anything.
Yeah, never going to amount to anything.
Yeah, that was it.
But do you attach to that now in your life, or when you say that, when I say that, I've told the story 20 times. You've heard it, of course. When my dad said, I graduated from college, and he said, this $1 and a cup of coffee, you can buy this $1, you can buy a cup of coffee, right?
Yeah.
Like totally minimizing any achievement I might have made. And I love him more for it. And I feel sometimes that you haven't made like that, like loving your parents more for it. It's still as if there's something you're managing emotionally in yourself.
Also true.
Yeah.
I noticed even I held my breath there. The complete sentence was when my dad left eventually. Yeah. So that was when I was 15. He just left. My mother would say, you're going to end up just like him. And him, before he left, there was a lot of beatings when I didn't understand something. So in a way, I can mentally see how that has formed me as I am.
Mm-hmm.
But am I at peace with it completely? I guess no. I'm losing my voice. I feel the, I don't even if that's true.
Well, I don't even know if it's peace. I would almost say, in some ways, what I would almost say, surrendering to it. Have you surrendered to that in yourself in like a loving way?
No, there's a part of me right now that wants to avoid. Like I want to grab the water and drink and like I'm seeing the escapism of like
beautiful.
Like
yeah.
And I can laugh at myself for even not wanting to just feel that pain. But I'm really happy today because
well, you got the Kleenex. Well, we don't need to actually, you might laugh, but for me, holding it lightly is the wonder and the love.
I know, Andy.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't know.
No,
I love the way you answered. It's like, Andy, it's already so obvious. What are you talking about? Yeah, but it's holding it with love.
Yeah.
And that's it. I'm not a big lover, although it might appear to people watching that I like to dig. It's not like I like to dig. I just like it to be grounded.
I would say
energy.
I would say there's nothing to fix, but what I love about you in terms of how you work with me anyway, or with people, it's always about heightening awareness. Like we're not going to pretend that that's not there, but we don't have to fix it.
Yeah.
So by talking about it just now, I just feel more centered. Even more centered.
Yeah, it's beautiful. So, yeah, I like that you say that because that is really true. There's nothing to fix, but why would we not be conscious around the things and the behaviors that we exhibit, right? Yeah, beautiful.
I was going to say dictatorship management.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we can get to that as well because I do have an interesting, I do like benevolent dictatorships, for leadership styles. And that goes contrary to a lot of the beliefs today of how people say one should lead. But I do see that in my history of working, a leadership that's really clear on what it wants and desires and that's open to feedback is the strongest combination that works best. Yeah. I've seen in some cases that leadership today says, hey, we're going to go to meritocracy. Everyone's going to have the same amount of what do we call it? Decision-making capability. And I've read, I've never seen it, to be honest with you, in all the years I've been working, but I've read that there are businesses that function that way.
What's it called?
There's a famous book. I can't remember the author's name, but he had a big business. Everyone in the company decided what their income was going to be. They all decided that, so everyone came to the agreements of everything. Nice. And it was beautiful. And I, at least from the paradigm that he created it from, I can imagine it would work, because he established from the setting, from the onset, this is the culture we're creating. I have a feeling that once a culture's been created and then you want to install something like that into it, it really is a painful exercise. Yeah.
It's almost better to get a divorce.
Yeah, that's been my experience through the years. And when we talked about this is again management versus leadership, and last week's talk was about avoiding pain and seeking pleasure, and those two competing. Yeah. And I just wanted to quickly note, I saw we have JC Barnett has been leaving messages on my wall for the last 2 months, and I keep asking him, please, if you want to leave a message, please send it to the Wonderful Chaos section.
JC.
Hey, JC, thank you. Yes, we can see it. If you post here, we see it. So getting back, sorry to segue back to, so when I'm looking at the avoidance of pain and the seeking of pleasure, and I apply that back into leadership and management, then management is predominantly about avoiding pain.
Yes.
And good managers are really good at avoiding pain, because they anticipate everything that can go wrong, and then they look ahead and they put everything in place so that it doesn't go wrong.
Yeah. Leaders,
their predominant mindset is not about avoiding pain, but it's about seeking pleasure. It's about, and there's a definition that my mentor Case created, which was a vision is a future reality lived ahead of its completion. A vision is a future reality lived ahead of its completion. And the idea being that a leader is looking into a future that no one else necessarily around them sees, and he starts living as if it's here today. And then slowly but surely, the group around him begins to take on the same beliefs and understandings until it becomes normalized, and then they've created that reality. And no one necessarily understands it as it's happening, because for a good leader, a lot of times they're considered insane. Right? Like people around them will look at them and say, hey, you're crazy. And then by living this, whatever this crazy life is, other people adjust to it, and then they sort of become crazy themselves. And strangely, through everyone's crazy, something new is formed. And that's the like the essence of leadership. Now I want to, I can make a lot of context statements here. Any company has different needs in terms of leadership. If it's a company that's running just a general simple business, it doesn't need a visionary leader per se. So I don't want to say every company is going to need leaders like the ones I'm describing, because a lot of times just funnily, let's stay this way. If you have a leader that actually is just a very good manager, they'll probably work well in 70% of the businesses, because they're managing against whatever the potential threats might be. But for those companies that are really trying to endeavor to do something incredible in the world, change maybe the way we live or the perception of how we live, then those companies and those leaders, they have the qualities that I just described a bit earlier.
Because they'll take risks also.
By definition, they take risks.
Yeah.
Their whole thought is that if it doesn't exist and I'm creating it so from my imagination, I'm now creating it, like that whole exercise is risk, because you're not imitating anything that's ever been done necessarily before. Yeah.
And you actually get to work with so many companies, right? I mean, you travel pre-COVID times, you were traveling half the year, if not more, and just living with some of the leaders. Did you work with managers also?
Yeah, I work with everyone, including the people that are just doing the grunt work.
Yeah. So but you would not go and stay with people who are doing
No, I do normally stay with the CEO of the company that I work with, which is kind of weird for most people that do this sort of life coaching work. But I've always said there's no real difference between the problem someone has in the office and at home. So, and like getting at home and seeing a dynamic, you know, a parent that can't set boundaries with the kids often can't set boundaries with people in the office. So it's not like that's a far stretch. And if you're close and you have an opportunity to like support someone and they trust you, right? Because there has to be a deep trust if someone's going to invite you into their lives like that. Then you can point out, hey, you realize that each time they ask you a question and you just say yes where you really want to say no, like that's a pattern that exists way beyond the office. And people are usually pretty appreciative if there's like someone loving and not judging them as they make these observations. So yeah, that's been, and I think boundaries is one of the bigger issues that I've had to support people, especially on the management level.
In what way?
So managers, from my experience, have like two things they're trying to do. They're trying to manage people against an expectation from leadership. So the leadership says we need to get somewhere. And then the management is like thrown into this tension because the individuals aren't necessarily doing the thing that the leader wants yet. So now they have to get these people to start acting or behaving differently to get something done. So they're managing these people emotionally while putting the tension in of trying to achieve something that these people didn't expect. So it's not an easy role. And think about it, like as a manager, you don't want to be disliked, but in order to get things done, sometimes you need to be disliked. So and sometimes a manager will feel a little bit guilty because they're asking favors of people. Can you work a little bit later? I know you're busy. Can you get this done? So in some ways, there can be, as I've seen in the past, a little bit of guilt. Like I don't want to push them too far because they've already done so much for me. So that's a little bit of the tension that I've seen in a manager's life. Trying to get people to do things, but not wanting to demotivate them. And from a director or from a leader's life, their whole vision is just making sure we get to the thing we need to get to. And how it gets done, I'm not all that worried about. As long as everyone's happy, of course. And as we know, not everyone can be happy, and that's where tension comes in the system. Right? Yeah. And I mean, it's pretty straightforward, actually. And now it gets back to the manager who wants to become a leader, which is scarily difficult at times. Because that's where I'll be brought in to help people. And it's like, imagine reprogramming your brain from being avoidant of pain to seeking pleasure. You know it from our experiences together. So last week when we were discussing, and it might have been 2 weeks ago, we had a guest, the money work with Peter Koenig.
Yeah.
And Peter said, what is your ideal amount of money you have? Right? What's your ideal amount of money? What would give you peace?
And I said 50, half a million.
You said 50,000.
50,000.
Yeah, you said 50,000.
And then he actually said it's never going to be enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but when you said the 50,000, you were thinking, how do I get rid of all the pain I've got in my life? How do I stop the fear of paying for a mortgage, paying for taxes, paying for this, paying for that?
Yeah.
So in a way, you were managing against the negative. So that would be like more of a management mindset. And then the leader mindset would be, okay, I want 500,000, and I want 500,000 because I see all the potential that exists within 500,000 and how I'll be able to create this other world for myself. And I see, and it's almost like you start painting a picture in your mind as you speak it out.
So one is, I need this money so I can avoid the pain of having to pay all these things.
Yes.
So it's not a headache anymore.
Yep.
or I want it, and I'm going to use it for da 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 da.
Yeah. Yes, I want it, and I'm going to use it for this. One you can feel is a very contractive energy, and one's a very expansive energy.
Yeah, I feel that.
Yeah. So
I feel the contracted anyway.
on a daily basis. But we've been flirting with the other energy. Like I've been pointing it out and asking you to try it on.
Yeah.
Like when we discussed if you want to earn more money, then it's how do I not lose money? It's how do I create an environment where I expand and create opportunities that I might not even see. And you see how even how I frame the questions immediately shifts how your brain starts working. Yeah, and that mindset shift is often the quality difference that I see in each of these roles of a manager and a leader. And there's Peter's principle, right? You get hired up to your level of incompetence. You know of this?
No.
It's basically it's a book that was written some years ago. It was Peter's principles. There's this character named Peter, and he keeps getting raises, and he keeps getting raised up in the hierarchy, and he gets raised higher and higher until he reaches the point where he's no longer competent enough to fulfill his role.
Okay.
So the point being is we often give people roles they're not capable of doing because they did the last role well. Like a typical situation I've been in many, many times is there's salesmen, and salesmen often have a really big desire to achieve and to grow. So salesmen often want to become sales managers.
Completely different ballgame.
Completely different ballgame, but they think, right? They have this idea, wow, if I become a sales manager, then I'm really somebody, even though they'll earn probably less money. But there's a status with this idea of being a manager. And what's curious is that now they've become the manager, but in actuality, all the skills required for that role were totally different than the roles that they needed for the sales role, just to be a salesperson. And I've seen that happen like so many times now. It's just an old story. Sales, and what often happens is the salesman who's doing really, really well, there's this weird kind of idea that, we take a salesman who's doing really well, and if we make him the sales manager, he's going to help a lot of people do well. And that's just not how it works. At least hasn't been in my experience. So that's a typical example of where we don't look at the skills required for a role. We just project qualification on because someone did a lower role well. And
so what would your suggestion be for a person like that?
My suggestion would be first to be conscious of that process in themselves. As always, with every suggestion, if you were ever to ask me any question, I think it'd always be the same. If you're unconscious of it in yourself, then you're reacting without awareness. And then I think it's learning to be comfortable in more of a step-by-step process of taking risk and seeing that the risk is required to succeed. And a lot of times, Ronnie and I, as we know, Ronnie, my wife, we're so contrary, as you know.
Oh, yeah.
So when we get into a discussion around like where we might want to live in the future, or even what we might do on the weekend, Ronnie, before any exploration, will often say why we can't or shouldn't, or why it's impossible to do something. And that's often at the start of our relation. Now I just make fun of it because it's so predictable. But before, it was agitating for me because I just wanted some space to dream. And what happens is as I've supported her to become aware of the behavior, she's been open to being more explorative in her journey. So when we have our discussions now, I'll say, "Hey, babe, like before you go to..."
Hey, babe?
Yeah, of course. Why? What would you think I say?
Honey?
But I mean, it goes all over the board. The problem is that I call everyone babe on the phone nowadays, so I always get in trouble.
It's not special anymore.
Yeah.
Continue. Hey, babe.
So, it's just about being open to see that your behavior might shut down exploration. So she's less looking at why it won't work and more open to what are possibilities. Yeah.
Can she do that by herself, or does she need you to support that process?
I think she would need me, and as time passes, she needs me less. Her role in the business that she's now in, which is quite beautiful, is to exhibit all the behavior we're now discussing about as a leader. So what I love is when we have any discussions now, when she says, "Oh, Andy, there's these things going on in the office," you know what I get to say now.
Told you so?
No, I wouldn't say that. I said, now you know how I felt all these years. And I mean, it's the funny thing, because this is where it's the fish in water. We don't even know we do it. Like, we don't know our predisposition pushes us in certain directions.
Well, you've all said in the very beginning of this conversation, how you behave at home is how you behave at work.
Yeah, but imagine to yourself, because I think people are pretty, we're pretty narcissistic on one level, that we think everyone thinks the way we do. Like, when I'll talk to Ronnie sometimes and she'll explain to me how she's going through her thinking process, I'll explain to her that that's unique to her. And sometimes she's a little bit like, no, it isn't.
This is common sense. Everyone thinks like this.
Everyone thinks this way. And I think that's what happens to some degree, is that we start to think our way of looking and seeing and experience it are universal. And if people don't do that, then they're just stupid. And that's obviously where we get into real problems, especially in the, I always point out at the United States at the moment, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, when I'm going in and coaching and training, then of course half of the training is heightening an individual's self-awareness. Because if they're not self-aware and they're just acting and people are reacting and they're not aware that people are actually reacting to them, there is not a lot of hope. And if you're in a leadership role, the tension you might feel if you're going from management to leadership is now people are starting to feel anxious because you've put a vision that they're not able to fulfill at the moment. And if you're a manager in a manager mindset, you're already trying to take away all the barriers to get them to do it. So you actually go from a leader to say, hey, we're going to go there in the next 5 years. And now it's not your role to decide how we get there. It's the manager's role. The manager might come to you, of course, and say, hey, I've got questions.
Okay.
But the whole thing is it's the leader's role in general, assuming that it's a pretty far-reaching vision, of course, to put something into the world that isn't yet realized so that everyone can rise up to that occasion. Yeah. And purpose and stuff, yeah.
Something in me says that there's a lot of information.
Okay.
And how can we have a little bit of an experience? And when I say that, I cringe a bit because I know I might be the guinea pig for that. But
okay, Bambos, where do you want to be 5 years from now?
You fucker. Andy, in 5 years from now, I am going to be the number one go-to corporate photographer in the Netherlands.
Okay.
Which should be easy.
Okay.
And having several photographers working for me.
Okay.
And almost a photography booking agency.
Okay.
With photographers that specialize in different branches.
Uh-huh. And how do people find you?
I'll be found number one on Google.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, you start to, I like, because you can see those who can't see you as you talk through. It's almost like you're saying it and you're almost, I don't know what the feeling is that comes up. What comes up when you say it?
Oh, I'm smiling because today I had a company saying, oh, you're really in the top. So they invited me to join their platform.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, it's happening.
Yeah.
So, but I do want to acknowledge that there's fear there because, oh, it's succeeding. And then there's fear.
Yeah. And that was what I wanted to point out. Because that little smile that you showed was like, what was...
You don't miss a thing, do you?
I mean, I was gonna name it, but I thought no. Let's let everyone who watches thinks I'm such an asshole naming stuff. But
You are an asshole.
But like,
a loving asshole.
let's leave it for a moment and just say, so that smile. What was underneath that smile?
The discomfort.
Yeah.
And then covering it up.
And what's the discomfort?
Oh, the belief, the underlying belief that it's not really going to happen for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that underlying belief is what sabotages you.
The underlying belief is really sabotages me.
Yeah. So imagine when I'm asking you to create a vision and that underlying belief is there. What do you see? How does it affect your whole mindset? Going back to our discussion.
Yeah, there's no free flow. There's like it's like putting a weight vest on.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to run and the weight vest is pulling me back.
And then I'm saying, dream, float, float in the air. Yeah.
Oh.
And that's the mindset.
That's the mindset.
That's the mindset. The leader doesn't think in terms of limitations at all. Doesn't even let it like at all come into their consciousness.
So
it doesn't mean, sorry, just to qualify it a little bit, it doesn't mean that it doesn't come in at the back end of the discovery. It just means they don't start there. Yeah. What are you going to say?
I actually forgot.
Oh, good.
So, oh yeah. So actually undressing and owning the unquestioned beliefs, underlying beliefs.
Yeah.
And then I think of Peter Kooning, To Tell Myself a Lie.
Yeah. Yeah. And Peter Koenig's work, which you'll see in The Wounded Healer. I mentioned Peter in the last letter as well.
And we have a podcast with him.
And we have a podcast with him, of course. His work would be really quite simple, is that whatever it is that you project onto success, and strangely enough, what do you project onto success?
Oh, me?
Yeah.
What do I project on success?
It's a paradox. It's just that might help you.
The first word which comes is, I'm a king of my own kingdom.
I would have just said, yeah, you have failure as the predominant feeling running through your veins.
Yeah.
So if you don't celebrate that and say, I'm a failure and it's fucking great, and I'm going to be successful whether I believe I'm a failure or not. It's like, now I'm back to this moment again. Like, you have to fully embrace that negative. And not in a way of embracing, like, some people watching might not understand this, so let's just slow it down a little bit. If I don't let that voice live because I resist it, I'm not going to resist it anymore.
So I'm a failure and it's okay.
Yeah.
And the reason it's okay is because I believe it. And if it's a belief, then it's insane actually to push it away.
Yeah, you're going logical, which is okay, but I would say stick with just staying with it. Like, actually feel it's okay. I'm a failure and it's fucking great.
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 It feels so good to let that in. Can you feel how great that feels? I mean, it feels good, Bambos. Feel it.
Well, I took a deep breath in right now.
I'm rushing. I know we're on the screen.
So I feel the spaciousness there.
Yeah. And that's the spacious. It's a counterintuitive move. It doesn't seem like it makes any sense because you're like, yeah, it's great. But when you create all the space, you're present again. And then you're like, and I'm going to succeed whether I think I'm a failure or not.
In the back of my mind, I just smiled because
what?
Like all these podcasts where I get to do this exercise.
Yeah.
And then I'm thinking, oh, in a year from now, I'm really curious where this journey will take me.
Yeah,
like I really see all these moments of letting go of an idea and revealing it.
Yeah.
It's really releasing and not really having to hide anymore.
Yeah. That's what we're talking about. Like, even earlier in the show when we talked about your parents watching or your mom watching and feeling uncomfortable. That's releasing. That's again one level. I'm now comfortable with that idea. Or not.
No.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. And that's the whole process, is how do you make peace with the noise and the voices inside of your head so you can just be present again in this moment. And it isn't always easy, because the not making peace with those voices has consequences, and those you know really well.
Getting stuck.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. Especially stuckness.
Yeah. And I mean, let's be clear. I mean, you went to drug addiction for all those years, and you got out of drug addiction by being very disciplined. You're the most disciplined person I know. So in a weird way, you've now like found one addiction, replaced it with another addiction. And now it's like, who are you without any addiction? We don't know. Maybe we shouldn't know, because, you might need that structure just to maintain your life. I don't know.
I really love my structure.
No, I think so. I agree. But there are times, and this is where I want you to like at least reflect on that. I love that structure may very well be the thing that stops you from being having the success you say you want. Even that could be a belief.
How would you explain that in the dynamics?
I would explain the dynamics. Sometimes when when we'll talk, you'll say, for instance, Andy, I'm going to learn Dutch because I want to prove to myself that I'm not stupid.
Yeah, that was definitely that, and also
Okay.
have been avoiding it, have felt shamed around it.
Yeah.
And this is so what I've told myself, and maybe you see more to it, is I'm going to fully own it, and I'm going to step into that space which scares me. And picking up a Dutch study book scares the fuck out of me.
Yeah.
Like I'll open it and my mind wants to go and vacuum clean.
Yeah.
So it's while I'm learning Dutch, the experience is I'm seeing how my mind doesn't want to be there, something better to do, and actually it's great.
Yeah. But now let's step back, right? So now we've gone before, and you've said in the past, what you resist, you often go into.
Yeah.
But I would suggest that's still your ego driving you.
What's the problem with that?
And no, it's not a problem, neither good nor bad, but it just means the decisions you're making are based on a reaction to a negative. I don't want to be dumb, so now I'm going to do something so I'm not dumb.
I don't want to be dumb. And because I'm not comfortable with being dumb, I'm going to do something about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And neither good nor bad. We're saying heighten your consciousness that's the behavior we're pointing at.
Yeah.
Yeah. And by the way, just to add, because JC is watching other shows, and he likes this comment that we've made in the past: comfortable in my confusion. So in some ways, there's just always a confusion there. And I would suggest, even the way he's pointing at it, whether it's the reason why he writes this or not, that's just the confusion in one's head. Sometimes you don't need to do anything with that confusion. It's just there. There's nothing to solve. Yeah. And therefore, the structure you create to solve it could also be part of the reason why you might get distracted from doing other things that are far more important for your success. Like sleep, for instance. Is that too? Did we rush through that, or is that?
it I hear it,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not sure if I'm avoiding right now. Like, I don't want to get into a discussion with you, so I can kind of defend my reality.
No. It's not avoiding. I'm not saying it's avoiding.
Yeah.
I'm saying it's just a behavior that may, and I use the big may word,
Yeah.
may not be conscious in you.
Yeah.
And that's it. No more. Don't judge it.
Like,
Yeah.
when you let's say mirrored me with this,
Mm-hmm.
and I went home, and the next day I was going to study Dutch.
Yeah.
In my mind, I was like, I don't have to do this anymore. Isn't it great? Andy said, I'm just using this as a mechanic.
Mm-hmm.
And just seeing how my mind wanted, like, all of a sudden there was an excuse not to do the thing that was difficult.
Uh-huh.
It was like getting me off the hook
for something you felt like you needed to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, wait a minute. We're going to do this because we've dedicated to it.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's for the next 4 or 5 months, at least get those sentences. And,
nice.
And
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But maybe.
And it can still I can see where it can take me off my path, because I can use that time to do other things.
Yeah. And on a level that was before more interesting only for me in this case, is where is my behavior stemming from and how is that driving me? Like, that's my question always. Like, what's going on? Not what do I need to do so I don't feel something, but what's going on inside of me? And that brings me closer to me all the time. So when we got to the point when you said, oh, I just don't want to be stupid, I'm proving to myself that I'm not dumb. Like, I would say, if that was clear from you from the start, which it very well may have been, then it's still a great thing to do. But it's not done from an unconscious reaction to not wanting to feel dumb. It's a very conscious action.
Yeah.
I do that as well, of course, right? Yeah.
Management versus leadership.
Yeah, and so leadership, again, if we kind of bring it back a little bit to our subject, leadership, again, would be the difference between visioning out and saying, I actually want to use Dutch because I see that in the future, my Dutch clients are going to be this, and I'm going to need Dutch in order to make more business. And so that would be more looking at making a decision from a visionary point of view.
As opposed to
as the management point of view would be, I just feel dumb, and people have asked me if I'm ever going to learn Dutch, and I always answer no, and I don't want to answer no anymore. That would be more of the management against the negative. That's the sort of bringing it back to the. What's going on in your head now? What's going on? Share with the.
Oh, that deep breath.
I could kind of see it was like. Oh, shit. You wanted it to be real, Bambos. That's what you get for asking for it.
Yeah, the ego is getting
oh yeah,
kicked.
Okay.
So.
And what is it? What's the? Thanks for staying with me, because in the past you've sort of, when you felt the ego was getting kicked, then you kind of would shut down.
Yeah.
So instead of shutting down, do me a favor and share with me what part of the ego is getting kicked? Like what?
Oh, just the idea of Bambos. And it's humbling to kind of expose my identity on a show. And so there's a deep breath in, and like, oh, this feels really uncomfortable, but at the same time it feels like, oh, this really needs to be done. This is what gets in my way of everything that I want to do in my life.
It's so weird. I need to share something with you, like when I think about the people I sit in admiration of, then it's you. Like, I look at your dedication. I look at your like unending striving to grow and learn. I wouldn't be doing the show if you weren't sitting next to me. It just is not of interest to me. And in some ways, it's almost like as soon as you give yourself all of that recognition, then whatever it is you think you are is no longer important anymore because you just love you.
It's a lot to take in. Thank you.
Yeah. And I always have this feeling like when you say the Bambos, the identity of Bambos, and feeling attacked, not me, but it is attacked. I don't ever feel like you're saying that I'm attacking per se. Then I
always see those moments as like love. You can also just ignore it. And
I guess what I'm desiring for you is that one day you just laugh at yourself because actually you are just love.
So you want me to be enlightened?
I guess if that's what enlightenment is, yes, I want you to be enlightened.
I don't have that ambition.
What we can say is this, is that if you look at management is often fear-based. It's working from fear and scarcity. And I'm inviting you to shift a little bit of your mindset into the leadership role, which is abundance. And it is a different experience. And I see, for me, abundance, at least in my case, is guided through love.
Like when I hear you say the word abundance,
yeah,
my head can't wrap. It can't, like, it's another paradigm.
Yeah, it is another paradigm.
And it's like you're asking me to pick which pill to take, blue pill or the red pill.
And you're like,
and it's like, oh,
what is it? Yeah, it's almost like there's a famous story of a children's story of the pirate. I'll have to find his name because I say it a lot and I never know his name. But he was stuck in the mud and he reached his own hand behind his neck and he pulled himself out of the mud, right? So the imagination that it was possible to pull himself out of the mud was the only thing that got him out of the mud, because no one else could do it for him. Van Mauthausen or something like that. And that's for me a little bit of the journey. It's like, oh, I've got to pull myself out from. I have to trust that doing this will actually lead me somewhere, but I don't even know where that somewhere is. I don't even know what that something feels like. And then you just test and experiment, right? So you say to me, Andy, I'm going to have a $500,000 business in 3 years, and I've got to figure out how to make that happen. Yeah, and then we sit and we have a very different talk. Can you imagine that talk compared to the other talk? Like, how do I make enough money to survive? Like, what's the difference between those two, night and day, right? And I think that's really kind of interesting because I always look at it because I'm very sensitive to how I'm triggered by questions. I see that certain questions drive certain parts of my brain. So some questions shut my brain down in terms of scarcity mindset, and some open myself up in order to creativity mindset. And it's so subtle that a lot of people wouldn't even see the difference. But I'm almost like a Geiger counter for questions. Like, how is the question impacting me? And for me, the questions that are full of wonder, where they have a desired outcome but no way to get there yet, are the most interesting questions. And that's
because it opens up your mind.
Because it opens up your mind, and there's an immediate tension, because the tension is something's been projected out in the future that doesn't yet exist. Now I have to be creative about how to get there, as opposed to how do I survive the next few days, which you could also still be creative around, by the way. It's actually it is a mindset. You could ask the same question in tension, and that'll spur you to have, more creative thinking, of course. Like if we sat downstairs and I said, hey, Bambos, let's think about how we can make a lot of money in the next 2 weeks just to get things going in your life, right? Like that's still a visionary question, as opposed to the alternative, which would be like, oh, you know what? Like, we really got to figure out how to pay the rent, and I don't know how to do that. Maybe we could try something, it just shuts down the creative juices. Yeah. Bola Long has joined us, as he often does. Bola Long, A Wonderful Chaos starring Bambos Demetria, co-starring Andy Chaleff. Now the journey's unfolding for me. Isn't that nice? Yes. Yes, Bolalong. Agreed. How does it feel to read that?
I wanted to avoid it. I didn't want to click on it.
Yeah. Yeah. And what made that you didn't want to click on it?
Some level of resistance and there's something there. There's something in that.
Okay. So let's put it back on the screen again.
Fuck.
And I want you to say, fuck yeah, Bolalong. Dead weight over here, Bolalong. Dead weight. Look at that guy. You know? Feel it.
Fuck.
Let's try it.
Oh, Jesus fucking Christ. Can I say that on live?
Yeah, of course you can. Bolalong's an atheist. It's okay. Can you feel it?
Like, I want to start crying.
Really?
Yeah.
What's coming up for you? First say it instead of start crying. I want you to engage the other part of your brain for a moment. Don't go down that road. Feel how it feels not to go down that road, because I could entertain that road for you.
Yeah.
Ratings will probably go up, actually. We've done it before. I want you to like say, oh, I have a choice right now not to let that part of my brain start to get active.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me, Andy? So I'm going to try it again. I'm going to take it off and I'm going to put it back on again. Okay, so it's the third time. Let's put on Bolalong's comments. Third time we're putting it on.
Fuck yeah, Bolalong.
Yeah.
Like a boss, Bolalong. Fuck yeah.
Look at him in the mirror. Look at him in the eyes and tell him.
Look who in the eyes.
Bolalong. He's there in the audience. You just have to look at him when you're talking to him.
Bolalong, fuck yeah.
That's what I'm saying. How does it feel?
That I somehow broke a pattern.
Yeah, that's the point. And you asked me earlier, when I'm coaching someone that's a manager and trying to help them become a leader, what does it look like? This is what it looks like. This is it. Because it's the patterns that we're not aware of that keep us in this loop, and we need to break the pattern. So this is an exact moment where that pattern breaks. Right?
Thanks for taking the time on the show.
Thank you. I trust your instinct. Every time you told me a show wasn't good and I thought it was good and I listened back, I realized it wasn't that good a show. So I know you have a better instinct than I do for good shows now.
What does that have to do with this moment?
It has to do with the moment that you, living your strength, have a better instinct around what makes for a good show or a better show than I do. How does that feel?
I trust that already.
Oh, good.
Without this moment.
Nice. I don't think that's true.
No, it is. Sometimes when we're with guests and we're with them, I already like, oh shit, this show sucks, but as long as the guest is enjoying it, it's okay.
I said that just to hear what your response was. It was perfect. Yes, exactly. That's what strength looks like, right?
Yeah.
You're not diminishing me in any way, and you're living your strength.
Or the guest.
Or the guest, right? Yeah, or the guest. Yeah, I noticed that, if I bring on high school reunion guests, they're not the best shows because it's just reminiscing, and that isn't necessarily good content. I've learned that. Thank you for bearing with me, Bambos.
But keep bringing them on. It's like you've booked us until October?
I think so, yeah. We're booked way out.
God.
Yeah. Yeah, so I really enjoyed how we took this show, because when we looked at the last two shows, which are our Monday shows, right? When we did the seeking versus avoiding, and we did the management versus leadership, you can really see how these mindsets fit into one another.
And if you don't, you need to go and watch the one from last week.
Yeah. And you see, I'm far more in this leadership mindset, although I had to learn that. I'm avoidant by nature, right? Dad was so abusive that I had to move away from that pain. And so I lived my life as a good manager, and I had to learn how to become a leader. And I learned how to become a leader by not letting fear guide me. Fear didn't guide me as a leader, right?
So if you felt fear, you would see the fear and you'd allow it to be there. So you just...
You're saying in the transition?
Yeah.
I think if I think about the transition, I was the director of the company, which I basically worked. I did a lot of leadership, but it was a lot of management as a role. When I left that and I became independent entrepreneur, it was the scariest journey of my life. I felt insecure. I felt like I could be homeless. I felt like when I was going to retire, I wouldn't have any money, and I didn't know how I was going to live. I didn't have any status because when you're in a big corporate, everyone wants your attention because you've got a budget, and I didn't have a budget anymore. So the people that would once want to meet me didn't meet me anymore. So I lost all of the confidence, and I had to go to the deep, dark place of feeling helpless and making peace with that helpless to then begin to be okay to dream. So it wasn't like one day to the next. It was like I made peace with all of the shadow, let's say a lot of the shadow. And by making peace with it, I could take a lot of risks because I wasn't living in fear anymore. Whatever you resist is the thing that's going to be your Achilles heel. That's what I've at least learned about myself. If fear guides you, then fear will be the thing that you're trying to avoid, whatever the back end of that fear is that you're not aware of in yourself. So if you don't want to be homeless, then, that fear will be the fear that stops you from being a dreamer. Because instead of thinking, how far can I go? You're thinking, how do I make sure that doesn't happen? That's the predominant mindset that pulls you all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. It's probably going to be one of those shows that I need to rewatch a couple of times.
We've also got JC Barnett on, by the way. Speaking of which, JC is going to be joining us on September 9th. JC actually was invited by two people, and I thought it'd be a great topic to have him on because he is a swim coach who's influenced hundreds and hundreds of people's lives. And I noticed that sports and coaching from a very young age has such a defining role in how people experience their lives. It actually replaces the father or the mother that they may not have felt that they had. And so I really was excited to have him on because other people wanted him on because they felt that he played such a role in their lives.
So you haven't met JC?
I've met him, yeah.
Okay.
We've met, although he wasn't my coach, he visited me on my tour. He drove, I think, an hour and a half, 2 hours to see me when I was in Bloomington, Indiana.
Nice.
It was really quite a beautiful moment to see. He took time out of his schedule to visit. It was really nice.
We've talked about the roles of coaches, and we've had guests also like Rocky who talked about her coach, and even though she said, "Wow, you really impact my life through a letter."
Yeah,
he didn't.
Yeah, I wonder. We'll have to ask him when he's on. Like, how far
is he's coming on?
Yeah, he's coming on. Yeah,
sweet.
How far is the coach ready to allow themselves to embrace the role they've had in other people's lives? Ronnie,
you've got time to think about that question.
Yes, you do. Ronnie has been watching these really beautiful, or listening to these podcasts, these really short ones, and one was about Edwin Moses. And Edwin Moses basically became a hurdler that got bronze, I think, in the Olympics. And he didn't actually hurdle. A year before, he first started hurdling. And then he ends up going to the Olympics. And the beauty was that he said that hurdling and like that self-discipline, what he learned and what the core of it all was about personal development, not about the sport itself. And Ronnie, it's funny because she didn't realize until then how important sport was to a child's life. She's often said to me she thinks sports are useless. from a child. That's
Well, I
what she
think
said.
watching sports is useless.
Well, I mean, informing a person and who they become. Right?
Yeah.
Ronnie was raised in Indonesia. It was so hot that basically you couldn't do anything outside. Women weren't necessarily encouraged to do sports. So let's just put it this way. Playing, I told you there's not many things that aggravate me with Ronnie. Trying to play tennis with Ronnie is very aggravating for me. There's no hand-eye coordination at all.
I haven't seen you guys play.
There's a reason for that. Yeah.
Let me know next time.
So
we've come to the end of our hour.
We've come to the end of our hour. Thank you. It's a great show. I don't know who our list of characters are. I haven't seen the list for tomorrow. Do you know who we have on tomorrow?
Should I quickly check?
We can check.
Forgive the notifications.
And just for those that are still watching, we have a great video that's going to come on right after the show. We're going to publish it on A Wonderful Chaos. It is our video to announce the podcast. We are now available everywhere that you can listen to a podcast: Apple, Google, Podbean, Listen Notes, Spotify, anywhere you can listen to you can find us. Tomorrow, Bambos has just shown me, tomorrow's show, we have on Christina Horstprager, who basically is going to come on to say, it's a boob, get over it. Christina has written a book about breastfeeding. She's started it's called, I can't pronounce it, but the Leche League Switzerland. So we're going to discuss with her breastfeeding, Bambos and I. And it's going to be a serious discussion, Bambos.
On
A Wonderful
Chaos.
Bye-bye.